Greetings, everyone. My name is Lowell Johnson, and I'm with the ACES Resiliency Coalition in the Brainerd Lakes area. And we're here today to talk with Tennille Palmer and Glenn Palm about building relationship skills during the early childhood years, which is usually considered from birth to about age 5. So let's start off with some introductions. So Tennille, tell our assembled group a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tennille Palmer. I'm also a member of the ACES Resiliency Coalition. I have a health bachelor's of science, a bachelor's of science background in health administration, and I've been working with children and families for about 10 years now, specifically in early childhood, family engagement, and community engagement. It's good to be with you.
Okay, thank you. And Glenn, give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Glenn Palm. I've taught at St. Cloud State for 30 years. That's probably the biggest chunk of my professional life in child and family studies and really preparing people for early childhood and parent education kinds of programs. I've worked with children. I was thinking about it today. I started 50 years ago. I could go look back at my first child development class 50 years ago and think about how things have changed since then, what we know about child development. I've been retired for the last 6 years and have been working on developing a children's museum in the St. Cloud, in downtown St. Cloud. So that's been a big part of what I've been doing for the past 6 years. That says probably what we need to say for now.
Hey, well, thank you both for joining us. So, Tennille, I'm going to direct this first question towards you. When a child is born, that first year or so is considered especially important. And there's a process called serve and return that is happening between parents and children during that time. Could you talk a little bit about serve and return and why it's so important in relationship building skills?
Most definitely. Thank you, Lo. So also, I am a mother. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and then I've got another daughter on the way. And so I'm always thinking about that, especially in my pregnancy right now. Oh, how important it's going to be for my daughter to know that she is emotionally safe. And that's going to look like her giving me cues, or whether she's hungry or just needs attention or just needs some skin-to-skin contact. And so when you're serving and returning in the relationship, especially in the early stages of having a newborn, that's important to create trust and build the relationship and build the bond, and then also help her with her own emotional intelligence so that she can continue to grow into a person who can be independent on their own and know that your needs will be met and that there are people out there that you can trust. So that's what that's what comes to mind when I think of serve and return, just nurturing that relationship and responding to the emotional cues of your baby and of your children.
Okay, thank you. So Glenn, there's a kind of a related concept or two concepts, attunement and attachment. And my understanding of it is attunement is being able to tune into that infant's needs, that ability of the adult to do that. And that attunement leads to something called attachment, or specifically secure attachment. Could you talk a little bit about those ideas?
Sure. Attunement really is the ability to be sensitive to the cues that babies are giving. Now, babies don't give very sophisticated cues at the beginning. Most of it is cries. And trying to sort out the cry is something, and what it means is something that parents for the first couple of months, especially new parents, are trying to figure out what is going on. And so it's being able to be sensitive to the cues of the baby, and that takes time and practice. It's the serve and return is sort of one metaphor that's used. Another metaphor is the dance, the parent-child dance, and sort of getting in tune, so to speak, with the rhythm of what's going on with the baby. And the parent, of course, has to kind of lead that dance, but they really have to follow the baby's cues also. And so you're doing a dance. And I think the parent-infant dance is another way to think about it. And once you get the dance down and it feels comfortable, things go smoothly, and you begin to build the trust that Tennille talked about. You begin to build that trusting relationship. So babies expect that when they cry because they're hungry, you'll feed them pretty quickly. If they need some comfort, you'll pick them up and you'll hold them, or you'll rock them. So you both get into this rhythm dance, and I think that begins to be attachment, which is a relationship that you have, the trusting, loving relationship that is then develops. So that's how I see it. Attachment is really that relationship that you're building, and being able to do the dance together. Most days, not every day is a good dancing day. Because of some things that may happen to you and some things that are going on with the baby. When babies are sick, that's the hardest part. If something's bothering them, if they're starting to get teeth, it's like, what's going on? The rhythm that you had, the comfort that you had as a parent, you have to switch it up a little bit. So paying attention to those things, and it's practice, but it's also knowing that the baby continues to change. So
your comments remind me of another concept called emotional regulation. And so there's as I understand it, emotional regulation, which is often referred to as self-regulation, means that when a person is experiencing any emotion, and especially some of the harder emotions like sadness or anger, that you're able to kind of soothe your own emotional state so that your sadness doesn't turn into depression, or your anger doesn't exhibit itself as verbal or physical violence. And so a person who is dysregulated, their emotions are just kind of in control. They get absorbed by this intense emotional state, and they don't feel very good, and their behaviors can also often cause problems for other people in the relationship. But self-regulation babies aren't born with that. They learn it through something usually called co-regulation. So either of you, what's your take on self-regulation, dysregulation, and co-regulation?
Mm-hmm. The co-regulation is a really important part for when we're talking about babies. So, moving back into that first year and thinking about babies can't necessarily calm down themselves, nor can toddlers. And so parents really have to be there to be the co-regulating partner for both babies and toddlers, and even preschoolers sometimes fall apart, and they need somebody to be there to co-regulate. Sometimes we put the emphasis on self-regulation for young children too quickly and think that they will jump into that. But in order for a parent to be a co-regulating partner, parents also have to be regulated themselves. And so if parents aren't able to regulate themselves, sometimes parents need a co-regulating partner. If there are moms and dads involved, sometimes there is this sort of tag team parenting of, right now I need a rest to regulate myself. And so it's the adult's ability to regulate themselves, I think, is a critical part of the process of children learning self-regulation. But I think, and I think that the parents sometimes can begin to hone that particular skill in themselves, because now they're responsible for doing co-regulation. So I think it's a learning opportunity for parents as well to be aware of their emotions. If you're feeling dysregulated and you're trying to soothe a crying baby, it's really hard. It's really hard to do.
Yeah, I echo what Glenn says for sure. It's more helpful if the parent has tools of their own, which we learned from our own relationships. And when we are able to use the tools that we have for self-regulating ourselves, whether it mean taking a break, taking a walk, tag teaming with the other parent, those are healthy strategies. And then also you're teaching your children how to find out what tools work best for them as well. if we put the emphasis on children to be able to self-regulate too early, they haven't really had a chance to figure out what that means for them. And so when you're thinking about the early childhood stage, it's a good opportunity to showcase and exhibit to your child what it is and what it means to self-regulate and how you can do that, whether it be depending upon another person or finding something that you enjoy. It's a learned behavior. Is the point of the matter.
So it sounds like the relationship of the parents, between the parents, is a factor in how children are learning both emotional regulation and social skills.
That certainly is a big part of it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes that's called co-parenting, or so just the idea that parents need to pay attention to their own relationship with the other parent and or other caregivers who may be involved in spending a lot of time raising that new baby.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to the issue of empathy. Empathy is sometimes seen as the core social skill. And Tennille, why don't we start with you? How would you define empathy, and how do you see that being developed during these early years?
Oh, okay. Yeah. How do I define empathy, and how do I see that being important in these early years? So the first thing that comes to mind is one of my favorite videos by Brene Brown, where she does this little animation about understanding empathy and how you can bring that to the table when someone is trying to tell you something difficult or they're having a difficult emotion. And though you may not have experienced it firsthand, coming to them with an understanding is the most important piece of empathy. And so that means acknowledging that they're having a struggle and that you just need to be supportive is how I see it. And that's important to have empathy in the early childhood stage, because this is a new person who's just learning how to build relationships, who's just learning how to socially engage. And so giving your child the building blocks or tools to communicate in a healthy way so that they can have empathy with other human beings is what's helpful in this stage, because they're in a learning process, and it's a basic part of having a healthy relationship with others.
And Glenn, I'd like to hear your ideas about something called emotion coaching. So we've been talking a lot so far about being in tune emotionally with other people, how important that is. And there's a whole area called emotion coaching. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Emotion coaching is really the parent being able to work with the child to develop empathy. Is certainly part of it, is understanding emotions in others. Part of it is having labels. Just the fact that a child can say, oh, what I'm feeling inside me right now is I'm feeling anger, or I'm feeling really sad. Being able to put a name to those, I think, is really important for when we're talking about young children, preschoolers, beginning to learn those labels and then beginning to see that in other people, I think, is also important. We used to think about empathy as the kids didn't quite understand it until they were 6 or 7 years old. And now we understand that even babies have an emotional attunement to their caregivers often. And so if their caregivers are feeling sad, the baby feels that and may even try and show some comfort and understanding of that, which, boy, when I started studying emotions in children in the early 70s, we didn't think about it that way. We didn't quite know that that was going on. At the same time, this more advanced kind of empathy and understanding feelings in others really takes time and practice, and it takes the child being able to be sensitive to what somebody is feeling, and understand their own feelings. So what we're asking kids to do sometimes when we're wanting them to be empathetic is probably more than they're capable of doing. If you know, we have to help them begin to understand their own feelings, begin to see them in other people, and then have the behaviors of showing empathy to other people. Even though we can maybe see a little bit of that in a 9-month-old, the full-blown empathy and understanding is harder because their feelings are so much bigger when they're preschoolers than they might have felt like when they were infants. And so being able to understand their own bigger feelings, I think is more of a challenge than we've thought that it was. We think that it's kind of an easy thing. Teach them their feelings, show them these books, they'll learn. And you watch adults who struggle with their feelings and you go, boy, we're expecting a whole lot of kids to do this. But emotion coaching is having kids understand, and parents really, in order to do that, have to be capable of when they're a coach, of understanding their own feelings, being able to be models of expressing their own feelings for their kids. Just like you might model, hitting a baseball or catching a baseball, this is how you do it. Kids have to see that in their parents as well. So I think it's having young children gives you an opportunity to get better at that as parents, which I think is an opportunity that oftentimes is missed because it's easy just to say to kids, I don't like the way you're feeling, go to your room, and when you're feeling better, come back. As opposed to, I think the parents show true empathy when they're able to be with their kids during all those difficult feelings and walk through it with them. The same as adults who are able to walk through difficult feelings with their friends.
So Tennille, Glenn has been talking about emotion coaching in kind of a one-to-one situation, parent to child. Do you see other ways that you can do emotion coaching that are maybe a step removed or a little bit different than just a parent and a child being together?
Sure. I mean, you get the example and the opportunity to practice the emotion coaching with your child and parent relationship. And then as you grow older and go into other relationships or your school age or as an adult, you're going to model what you've learned in your household. And so that happens with your siblings or with your friend group, your peer group, your teacher, and having that emotion coaching and having the ability to label your emotions helps you to build trust with others.
Yeah, and I've heard other people talk about how sometimes it's when intense emotions are hard to deal with. So sometimes looking at emotions that are kind of out there somewhere else in a book. There are a lot of children's books that deal with emotional issues, or in a video, a screen of some kind where it's somebody else's emotions that you are looking at, talking about, discussing, that's easier, and then allows the child and the adult to be more positive in the expression of their emotions.
Right.
Yeah. So let's move on to another area of parenting during the early years, and that's about boundary setting, because no child is perfect. Children are going to engage in behaviors that are problems for the parents, and setting boundaries. How does a parent set boundaries in ways that are going to help a child with their social skill development?
I mean, boundaries keep us safe. You want your child to explore and learn the world, but you don't want them to run into the street. And so it's social expectation that we don't run into the street in front of the cars. And so you're letting your child know you care about their safety and that this is how you keep yourself safe in the world. And that's just one example. And then there's also boundaries about communication, about how we're going to talk to each other. And yeah, that's where I'm at with that. And mostly when I think about safety is when I think about what a parent is doing to to keep their child safe and saying that, okay, I'm putting this limit, I'm giving you this limit because it's for your own good, it's for your own safety, and that it'll help keep you safe and alive and healthy and well. What would you add, Glenn?
Well, I think that parents, first of all, parents don't want to create situations where they're constantly having to say no to their toddlers. So you try and create an environment where there aren't as many no's. So you're not constantly caught up in that kind of situation. You're trying to guide your children, and really you have to set clear limits. You have to be consistent about what your expectations are. And you do have to keep thinking about the child's safety and what kind of environments you allow them in. You know, when you're getting out of taking your toddler out of a car and you're in a Target parking lot, you want to hold on to their hand because they don't know that if they walk behind the car, there may be another pickup coming behind that doesn't see a 2-year-old walking out in front of them. So some of it is parents keeping children safe, Tennille, as you say. But we want children to learn. We want children to learn to follow rules. We want to give them some simple rules. We want to be very clear about what kinds of expectations we have, and we want to have expectations that are realistic for them. So we have to know our child and what we can expect at different ages. One of the reasons for knowing something about child development is to know what kids are capable of. Sometimes they do something once and parents think, oh, they're capable of doing this all the time, but they're not. They're impulsive, they make mistakes, and so they're learning some of the self-regulation that we just talked about, but they make a lot of mistakes at doing that. So I think that guidance is important. We used to think that it was a lot of praise and reward and punishment. When I was thinking about this morning, talking about this with you today, it was like, that's what I learned as a graduate student. Behavior modification was really a big deal back then. And it was more about rewards and punishment, but we learned about punishment and how to do punishment and how to manipulate kids' behaviors in some ways and pay attention to that. And I think that that's important. But this relationship that we talked about building as an attachment relationship, guidance, being with kids with their emotions, knowing that they can come to you is important. When I was spending time with my 2.5-year-old granddaughter, one of the fascinating things was watching her say, she's 2, right? So she's saying, I'm going to do it self. I'm going to do it myself. And then 10 seconds later, help. One of the things, and that's a toddler, that's where they're at. They fluctuate rapidly between those two. But something that struck me was how important that first word help was, and how she had learned help because when she said help to her parents, they came and helped her. Mm-hmm. And so help was a really powerful word. And I hadn't necessarily heard toddlers use help so effectively as she used it when she said help. And if you go when they say help, just like if you go and take care of them when they cry, and help is a much better elicitor for parents than which would be the other call for help that would come out of toddlers. So the whole guidance thing is so, it's built on thinking about how you want to teach kids something. And oftentimes we go right to punishment or taking things away or just the praising part. And I think that there's this whole realm of guidance tools that parents use somewhat naturally. Some of it's just paying attention to your child, listening to your child.
So it sounds like developmentally appropriate expectations of a child and listening and tuning in are key ideas. So as we approach the end of our time together, I'm going to ask Tennille first for just kind of a summary of what would your advice to new parents especially, but any parents of a young child, what can and should they be doing to promote positive social skill development?
Yeah, absolutely. What parents should be doing to model positive social skill development with their children is, starting with your own relationship and starting with yourself, having the tools, acknowledging emotions, whether big or small, and accepting those emotions and normalizing those emotions within yourself and then within your relationship with your partner, and then also bringing that into your relationship with your child even before birth. It can be a scary process, and though it's also exciting, it can be frightening to just know that you're going to be responsible for another person. So always being aware and acknowledging your emotions, and then also just being a strong support system as best as you can be to your child. And remember to get down on the floor and play with them, because that only lasts so long. And just take every moment in and build trust where you can, in every opportunity, and hope that all those moments will build up to a loving a parent and adult child relationship where you will still be able to have trust and communication with each other because you've been building up on that since before they were born. That's what I'd add. Thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tennille. Glenn, same question for you. What's kind of your summary advice for parents of young children?
To watch, listen, wonder about their curiosity, their amazing capacity to learn. So I think being able to be with kids, and I think the other part of it, and Tennille, you said a lot. The other part that I think is for parents to find support for themselves. This is a time that you also need support from other adults. We have wonderful parent education programs called Early Childhood Family Ed in Minnesota. And I've watched those for 40 years, and I've watched parents come into them, be with other parents and their kids, and really learn together, to support each other and learn from each other, learn new things that help them enjoy being a parent, and help them know when they need some help that there's a place to go ask for some help, and not be afraid of that, to be asking for help if they need help, because children can be, and child rearing can be challenging. So being open to getting help, and being open to this is a time for you to grow as a person as well, I think is something I'd like to see stressed more.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Tennille Palmer, Glenn Palm.